Working class Americans are struggling to make ends meet while corporate America is seeing record profits. In order to rebuild our economy, we have to strengthen protection for working Americans, and I have Howard Nations with me to tell you how that can be done. Howard, it seems like the media and certainly the Beltway politicians have a very difficult time trying to understand that when labor in the United States flourishes, the economy flourishes, and we actually develop a middle class. We've talked about this so many times, but now we can see we can see the fact that the government's inability or unwillingness to act, both through the Labor Relations Board and OSHA and you name it, we have a government who simply is sitting on their hands, not protecting the American worker. What's your take?
Well, right now, the American public is focused on economic injustice, and it's time to move and try to leverage that concern that the public has. Right now, we're facing a very daunting labor market, and unless there is political intervention by government, federal, state, and local, there are going to be fewer career opportunities. There's going to be loss of economic security, and you're going to have people in America today in the current generation who are going to be making less money than the previous generations. That's unheard of for our society. But the big thing right now is that you're running into a complete failure to implement the rules that are there, to pass new rules, to bring rules up to date. Regulations are completely outmoded. One of the most amazing statistics I've seen on it is OSHA. You take OSHA, for example. Now, OSHA is supposed to be occupational safety and health regulation, but in OSHA, it is amazing to see that they have, in the last decade, they have actually stopped the implementation of more rules and regulations than they have begun, than they have finalized. This is occupational health and safety.
And the reason that seems important is because the last report, probably the most comprehensive report that came out of the Roosevelt Institute, very important report talking about how do we make adjustments for the 21st century, how do we avoid trashing the labor market in this country to where it doesn't all just shift over to a third world country. That's what this report was about. They were so concerned that we're losing jobs at a rate that all we're left with in the United States now are service industry kinds of jobs. People working at a hotel, people working in restaurants, people serving wealthy people. That's where this country is headed. And they looked at it, as you pointed out, they said, well, the biggest problem, of course, is the minimum wages are just non-existent in most, they're deplorable. People are working overtime and not getting paid for it. People working in conditions that are so dangerous that day to day they don't know if their life is going to change by an awful injury. There's no labor relationship. You don't have workers that get to negotiate with employers anymore. It's all one-sided. So they took all of these things and they said, right now we are in a very, very serious situation. Pick up from there and say, what do we do to save ourselves to where we don't become a third world banana republic in the labor market?
Well, the anchors of our employment relationship have always been minimum wage, health and safety regulations, and the right to organize. The right to organize, the unions are the cornerstones of the middle class. People who are not members and never been members and would never consider being members have been greatly helped by the union, which lifted everybody. But since the early 80s, these anchors have been decimated. Our laws have been weakened, our standards are stagnated, and the exemptions to regulations are simply bought by corporations through their lobbyists. The employer responsibility has been decimated. They're no longer legally accountable. Employers cut labor costs. They figured out it's cheaper to buy politicians than it is to pay employees. And it's cheaper to buy politicians through the use of their lobbyists than it is to meet labor standards. And OSHA, as you say, has just stagnated. The OSHA regulations, many of them were written in the 70s. They've never been updated. There are incessant attacks on the laws that we have. There's perpetual attempts to change product liability laws to take away the right to recover for things like the latest General Motors fiasco. So there are any number of things that need to be done, but it's all going to have to be policy intervention.
Well, you know what, Howard, and I'm not embracing this position, but you're seeing more and more writers that have been great populists. They've been great progressives. They've been advocates in every sense of the word. They've been journalists. They've been media folks that have said, you know, I'm damn tired of trying to save the middle class when the middle class brought this on themselves. If you look at and here's, again, this is not me speaking. This is coming from all different directions. It is that, you know, it's the middle, it's a big part of these workers that they were so ginned up on cultural issues like guns and gay rights and racial issues that they said they ignored the fact that corporate America and Beltway politicians were taking away their jobs. We're making it to where they don't get minimum wages when they work overtime. They don't get any wages when they work overtime. There is no fight. There's no balance between employer and employees. There's no regulations to protect them on the job site. There's nothing to protect corporations for shipping jobs over the seas and getting tax benefits to do it. That's where this is all headed. So you have a whole group of people, Howard, that are saying, you know what, hell with them. This is what they wanted. This is what they brought on themselves. They got so ginned up on cultural issues, this happened to them. I hate to see that happening, but you would have to agree that is happening within the progressive media right now, isn't it?
It's definitely happening. And those people that are so concerned about their guns, a lot of them right now are being the victims of wage theft by employers. Wage theft is a fairly new term, but it's come about as a result of people who are not paid the minimum wage that are entitled to it under law, people who are denied overtime pay, people who are working in hazardous workplaces, people who have retaliation for speaking up. All those things that unions protect this middle class from, they don't have those anymore, and wage theft has become a huge problem. There was a recent study called Broken Laws and Unprotected Workers, where they looked at 4,000 low-wage employees in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. 26% were getting less than the minimum wage. 78% were underpaid for their overtime. 70% received no pay for coming to work early or for working late. And 43% had illegal retaliation in the event that they complained about it. The people that were targeted were not just immigrants, but they were women and people of color. But all workers, according to this study, all workers are at risk for wage theft by employers.
Okay, and so what we see now happening in the Beltway is you have people like Paul Ryan, for example, are saying, gee, let's go ahead and give corporate America an actual tax break for taking their corporation, moving it out of the United States, moving it to Saipan, moving it, to India. Let's give them a tax break to do that, and you still have these same people, the same boneheads that they've become. As I say, it's collectively the progressive media. They're saying, I'm tired of it. I'm tired trying to fight for these folks. I'm just at the point of giving up. These same people are paying more attention to things like gun rights and gender rights than they are the fact that as their tensions over there, the corporate America is taking their jobs over here, out of the country. And we're becoming a service industry. There's no way around it. We don't build things anymore. We don't make things. We don't even fix our own damn roads. We've become a banana republic service industry, haven't we?
We really have. And the thing that's being really wasted, Mike, is the incredible leverage that government could have in correcting these problems. The purchasing power of the United States government is $1 trillion a year they spend. It's $500 billion a year in purchases. It's $500 billion a year in purchases. $500 billion a year of money going to the states. And then an additional $50 billion a year that money is being distributed by the states. If they would simply tie the enforcement of existing laws and regulations and the passage of new regulations to that money, to getting those contracts, to getting those infrastructure contracts and things of that nature, incredible things could be accomplished. But the Beltway is more concerned with money going to the politicians. It carries more weight. The result is they can't pass legislation. They won't pass regulations. They won't enforce existing laws and regulations.
And all they have to do is something as simple, Howard, as you're pointing out. They have $500 billion to play with. They could say, you know what, Mr. Employer, you just lost your government contract. You know what, Mr. Employer, you just lost your subsidy. You know what, Mr. Employer, you on a competitive bid, you're not taking care of your workers, and we can't do business with you. They could do all of that, but again, you have an administration that talk big. Oh my God, they were going to do so much for the worker. They were going to make the worker's life better, and an administration who talks a big game. But at the end of the day, they've done nothing for the American worker. And I'll point out, the American worker has done nothing for themselves either. Howard Nations, thanks for joining me, okay?
My pleasure, Mike. Thanks.